Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to the Art and Science of Learning Summit. If you are just joining us, we are glad you're here. We just wrapped up a conversation with Roberto Aiello, who is a learning designer from Personio. We were talking all things AI and learning design. And now this session is all about how to gamify and design courses based on principles from pop culture, video games, and board games. So get ready for a fun one. My name is Audrey Krause. I'm the Marketing Programs Manager here at Intellum, and I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Program Manager for Evolve, Helen Bailey. I want to let Helen introduce herself, but before we do that, I want to address a few housekeeping items. So first and foremost, this webinar is being recorded. We will have time for question and answer at the end of Helen's presentation. So if you think of questions throughout, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box, which is just below your video screen. Also, if for whatever reason the video becomes blurry, there is a gear icon on the bottom right corner of your screen. There you'll be able to adjust the resolution. So feel free to adjust that manually if you find the visuals become blurry at any time. And lastly, we want to hear from you. We want your feedback. So below on the bottom right corner of your screen, you'll see a Rate This tab. And feel free to fill that form out at any time during this presentation, specifically at the end. We want to make sure that these sessions are insightful and impactful for you and worth your time. So definitely take a moment to do that at the end. All right, with that, I want to introduce Helen. Helen is joining us all the way from the UK and has been with Intellum for the last 4 years. So with that, Helen, I want to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Well, hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to my talk today about going beyond the ordinary. We're looking at elevating your learning content design by being curious and taking inspiration, as Audrey said, from the world around you and things that we come across every day. So in this session, I'm aiming to help you think creatively about learning design by being curious and using those principles from play and to guide your development and create engaging, immersive experiences for memorable learning. As Audrey said, I'm Helen Bailey. I'm a curious creative, a gamer, a puzzler, and an avid reader, and I will be your guide on this quest. So first of all, I would like to pose a question to you. And for that, we're going to launch this poll. So what the question is did anyone who was watching, did you give or receive or even just play any kind of game this holiday season? Now, by game, I mean anything from a video game to a board game, some sort of escape room or puzzle game, cards or dices, or even an outdoor game if you were brave enough to be outside in this cold weather. So I would love to know if that's the case for you by just using that poll, if you can see it at the bottom there. So if you were brave enough to play a game, let me know if that is the case. And I'm expecting to see quite a high percentage there because even in these days of massively available passive entertainment such as Netflix, we're inherently an interactive species who likes to have meaningful experiences. And we've been playing for more than 5,000 years. The first board games were found back in ancient Egypt. So yes, we've been playing for a long time, but there's quite an old-fashioned view of play sometimes. It's something just for children, or we stop playing when we become adults because we don't feel we have the time for it. It feels like something we should be doing something more useful with our time. But it's regularly been shown by science that play benefits people of any age. For example, we need a play to keep our brains flexible and to ward off depression, remain optimistic, and to keep up our social and emotional connections and skills. So the poll does seem to be reflecting that right now, and I think that's great because I think it is sad if we stop playing at some point in our lives. There are many different types of game out there. Even if you don't consider yourself a gamer, you'll find something engaging, such as Lego, and there's even a Lego serious play movement, which is actually using Lego to learn critical thinking and promote ideas and challenge ways of thinking. So wonderful there. We got around a 70-30 split going on. So that's pretty good and pretty nice to see. So thank you for that. And my next question, but no poll for this one, is if you did play a new type of game over the holidays or any time really, how do you learn to play it? If it was something you hadn't actually come across before, maybe a new family board game that arrived or something that was dusted off out of the cupboard, how did you actually learn it? Obviously, a lot of board games come with some sort of instruction manual in the box, or we take it out and we're sort of the one tasked with reading the instructions. And often halfway through, people will glaze over and they'll say, what, hang on, can you just go back? And then eventually someone will just say, oh, let's just play it and learn as we go along. So what we can't expect is our learners these days to read a lot of information just on how to do something and how to take a course. We need to drip feed instructions at the point of need. And that's what I tend to do. We'll jump in and play a game, and we might need to sort of quickly refer to the rule book every now and again. But do we actually want written rules anymore? In a recent Training Network magazine talk I was watching, Christopher Allen of Allen Interactions told us to quit writing. No one is reading. And it did make sense. Do you agree with this? I'll send a link with the resources for this talk so you can check it out. But basically the modern workforce is, and as an adult these days, we just tend to skim and skip read rather than deeply reading and engaging in text. When we see a large chunk like this, we take in the first few words, and the rest is pretty much just noise or becomes instantly forgotten, because we have social media, we have a frantic pace of life, and we're training people to minimize reading and comprehension. We also have to consider, of course, those with lower reading levels and those whose written word is not easy for them, or it's not their first language that they're reading in. So these days, you'll find that there are tutorials readily available on YouTube for pretty much anything, including solving Rubik's Cube or fixing things in the house. And the team behind the popular game Exploding Kittens knows full well that the reading rules is probably one of the most tedious ways to learn. So why are we doing it still? Why are we still writing instructions out? Well, like I said, we can just get in and play a game or learn a concept. But if you play with somebody you already know, like a mentor, or watch a video on it, it can be a little bit more fun and interactive. Now, there are downsides to learning this way. For example, if you're playing with a friend, do they actually know the game fully themselves? Maybe they have their own family rules. Monopoly is a great example of that. Or they might have fun shortcuts in the game and they're not teaching you the proper things, possibly even to get some sort of advantage over you. There's also the fact that if you just jump in and play, you might actually miss something exciting or some sort of benefit from the game because there are certain tricks you didn't learn by reading the full rules. So often we find we want to use a combination of these practices, something that will help us learn quickly while still enjoying the fun, but to maximize the benefits and the intricacies of the game. So hopefully now you can start to see the parallels I'm drawing between playing a game and learning something through an online course or some sort of training. We can either read information that we've been given, we can watch some sort of demo or friend playing and have a mentor style learning, or we can just jump in and play ourselves. Now, in the learning design world, there's a lot of work done around learning personas and the often contested learning styles, which reflect these types of practices and learners. And we know that they all have their pros and cons. For example, not everybody likes to do team games or reads things or to do any kind of situational testing. We may have issues creeping in from secondhand teaching. Like I said, a member of family who's learnt to drive and is teaching you might have some bad habits that they learned since their original driving lessons. So you may miss important features or learn things that might be detrimental or even dangerous further down the line. And this is why we have our subject matter experts who are providing the information for the learning. So I'd like to read this quote to you. You are thrown into a new, unknown territory. There are goals to achieve, but things around you are unfamiliar. The rules of this environment are as yet unknown, and you have very little idea how to get around or who to talk to. Now, what am I talking about there? Am I talking about the latest video game title, latest and greatest, as the image suggests, or am I actually referring to someone's first day on a new job? It could be both, couldn't it? So video games and onboarding both have a very similar start almost. And I'd like to give you some ideas for incorporating the techniques used by the gaming world to help you bring a little gamification into your learning principles, using the game design that has already been established and successful. Now, I can almost hear some mumblings at this point. I always try to anticipate some of the reactions people have when they hear the word gamification. And some people immediately think it means presenting learners with some sort of colourful, bouncy game with animations and fancy graphics and music. But whilst all games are experiences, not all experiences have to be games. So we don't need you to create the next AAA best-selling Xbox game out there for Christmas. We don't want you to come up with the next Tetris. What we do want is to just use the concepts of learning and the successive games that can be applied to any type of learning course to make them more engaging, rewarding, and obviously to justify my implication that video games are relevant to learning. So video games, with a few exceptions, always used to have a little booklet in them to, in the olden days, to teach you how to play, just like our board games have the instruction manual. I'm definitely showing my age now. But in modern games, they will often bring up a menu showing the controller that you're using, as seen here. And it will tell you what each button does. And now, I don't know about you, but I think I would struggle to remember all of these. And it's a case of, you know, the brain is not a muscle, but it can be trained like one. So if you were to learn how to play the game using this, and you were repeating the actions and going back and forth with regular practice, you may well master the game through this. But if you think of apps like Duolingo, or even when you're learning something like knitting, you soon know all the stitches and you can do them without thinking. But I'm guilty of just ignoring most of this and jumping in straight in to press play and hope for the best. But what if you never discovered that there were treasures above your head because you didn't know that you could jump up to a higher level? So these days, there is often some sort of written or visual content that you begin the game with. And this is often a little backstory or some sort of cutscene or even written prose. If you think of Star Wars, it has the scrolling text that you read over some engaging music, and it kind of tells you the lore of the world. And often you're shown some sort of introductory event. Now I'm going to just switch over to my video screen here. And this is a quick video. Now, just to warn you, if you are sensitive to moving images or flashing, you may want to look away for a couple of minutes. But this is just a very quick video, which I've sped up as well. And I just want to point out some of the ways that this introductory scene of the popular Super Mario series sets up the entire game. So first of all, we get an introduction to the colourful world we're operating within, and then we meet our characters who will be sharing the experience with us. So we come across all sorts of challenges, and we are given some tools to overcome that obstacle. We may even get an early reward for this. Then we're introduced to a character who's having a problem. And in just one illustration, we can see what that problem is and that they need your help. But then we're presented with an even more challenging situation. Finally, we're introduced to our method of navigating through the world, which looks a lot of fun. And then finally, we're thrown into our interface and we are given a goal to achieve, and we know that we're primed to move towards that goal and be the hero. And just as the video finishes there, we see a small pop-up which would give you a clue as to how to interact. Press A to jump, which she duly then does. Okay, let me switch back to the slides there. There we go. Excellent. So as you begin some modern games, you're introduced to the concept slowly, usually sort of one at a time, and in a controlled environment where there are no enemies and just a few easy challenges to drip feed you. It usually starts learning how to move around and to see the consequences of your actions in a safe space. And that's something we love to do here at Intellum. We provide a sandbox area where you can try out things without fear of damaging other people's work. And quite often when you're playing a game, then you learn to combine concepts and repeat them so that they become muscle memory. So we have something obvious to do. There may be some sort of goal, something glowing on the screen right in front of you, or someone waving. And often one of the techniques that's used is to have some sort of friend or teacher or father figure, or even just some sort of light that will guide you through the area, show you which way to go and show you the ropes. Another commonly used tool is to create your own character at the start of a game. And characters are important to us because in video games, books, films, for example, we're living through their eyes and their actions and their words, and they take us on the journey. You don't have to have your learners create a character in your courses, but what you do need to do is give them the role of a character in their own story. That will hook them in and give them the purpose and the rewards and the outcome of their actions. So it's going to be beneficial to have some sort of avatar, but it's not necessarily something that you must do. You don't have to have any kind of visual character or humanoid presence that's providing you, but we can just use the voice, the guiding voice when we write. If you're welcoming and guiding and chatty in your tone, and you use the second person by referring them to the learner as you, for example, you're going to learn how to do A and be better at B so that you can do C. And one way we've approached this in the new Intellum platform certification is that in each of our modules, we've contained an introductory video, which features narration by 2 of our team, in which they explain why you're taking this journey. You learn the tools available to you and what you'll achieve by the end, and they're basically our cutscenes and our guiding lights rolled into one. They set the scene, they lend a face to the journey, and they prepare you for the next stage where you're going to be actively moving through the content and beginning to learn and experience and actually partake. So tutorials can often get a bad reputation, and just like if you're an e-learning or learning experience designer, you'll realize that they can often be a little bit of a barrier to learning. They can be skipped through, or they can be a little bit of an impatience for people who are a little bit more advanced in their learning so far already. So wherever possible, make your tutorials short and skippable, and if possible, interactive. And this is where services such as Pendo or UserPilot or your own customer onboarding tools can be very useful, because you can take learners through any process or physical steps in real time, and it gives them the chance to practice hands-on and get that muscle memory built more quickly. They can also help you point out useful features or steps that might have been missed, or features that are underutilized, for example. They also help you to simulate specific tasks, or to even combine or demonstrate emergencies and allow the learners to practice their responses. These can be useful in software training or engineering applications, health, or workplace, such as having difficult conversations or dealing with issues. And these days we have so many AI tools available to you. You may have learned some from our previous talk just now, which help you create these scenarios quickly and act like a video game where the context and content can change depending on how you progress through the journey. In a talk I saw at Gamification Europe recently, Andrzej Maciejewski gave a wonderful talk, and he demonstrated this Hexad framework, which is a player types model, and it explains the types of motivation people experience when they're learning, and how that motivation changes when new goals or needs or just curiosity takes over. Each learner starts with a dominant motivation, which is usually the player. They are engaging in your learning. And it may be straightforward. They need to learn something as a box ticking exercise, or they want to learn a skill or advance their career. But over time, their type changes depending on how they perceive and engage with the material. It's a fascinating model and makes more sense to me than the traditional learning personas, because it shows how we change as we learn and are influenced by all sorts of factors. The basis of a traditional gamification system also looks at things like giving points and badges, but it also gives certain types of player an opportunity to be independent and creative and explore further into topics that they're interested in. So, for example, you can give socializers the option to share their findings or nurture others with the knowledge. You can also give people opportunities to reshape or collaborate on things. And you also have the option to provide feedback. And this is vital if you're tracking and testing your learners as they take the journey, because beyond just identifying how many hours they spent on the course, you will also want to know if there's any patterns, any hurdles, how they're engaging, and what the outcomes are from the learning you've provided them with. Is it actually making a difference to their skills and their job prospects? I'd love to go further into Andrzej's work right now, but time is short. So I've popped his site there on the slide, and I urge you to have a look into those principles if you think you would be interested in them. So here's how we use these kinds of principles and patterns in our content here in Intellum. So gamification can just be this level, providing an aim and a reward, and at the end you're rewarded with a certificate and a sense of pride, hopefully, that we instill through the learning. And we encourage learners to share their certification on LinkedIn, because not only does this get them even more validation and praise from their social network, but it's also a great marketing tool because it helps other people be aware that the course exists. We also have badges and points on our platform, and these can be awarded based on specific skill areas. So not just on completion of a task, for example. We also offer challenges to encourage completion and competition, and those are always optional because some people prefer a very serious academic way to learn and will not appreciate anything that tries to inject fun. So always making sure that those personas and player types are counted for, and that you can make sure that there's a main goal that everybody achieves, no matter how they approach it. It can help to break up large courses, as we know, into smaller hits of such as games that offer information based on levels. And there are things like Candy Crush Saga out there, which I was very much addicted to. It has roughly sort of 18,000 levels these days, and I think I got to 5,000 odd. But you have to wait and see if you want to carry on. You've got rewards to gain, but the little dopamine hit doesn't sustain you for very long. What you need to do is to make sure that you are offering increased levels of difficulty during the journey, or that you're offering rewards at multiple stages. And this breaks up the learning into smaller hits, and it's great for certification, for example, where you can look back and see what you've achieved in a module and feel like you're leveling up at the time. In Evolve, our authoring tool, we offer assessments, attainment, options, achievements, and logic, which can be used to control the learner journey by incorporating pre-tests, or sending learners to specific content, or delivering up certain parts of content based on their performance or requests during their journey, basically. We have variables which allow you to personalize the course based not only on their name, but also on their profile information, meaning you can tailor every learner's journey individually, and along with granular control over the completion criteria in the platform, Evolve allows them to make choices on what they do and don't consume. So very much like skipping the dialogue in a computer game, or skipping the recap on your Netflix show, our Learn, Evolve and platform certification courses allow you to take things at your own pace. They show a series of difficulty levels, and that allows you to approach the course based on your previous experience level and how confident you feel, and how much you've experienced before on this topic. It gives you time not just to feel frustrated and tied in, but you are given progress and praise and victory at certain points, no matter what route you choose. You should also always be able to step away from learning these days, and return whenever you want. We have very busy schedules. We have emergencies to deal with, especially if we work remotely and have families. And if you were to play a computer game for 3 hours and then you went back after dinner and you had to go all the way back to the beginning to get back to the boss level fight, then you're going to be pretty annoyed. Or, for example, if you took your game of Monopoly out, you nipped for a rest break, and when you came back, it'd all been put back in the box. So I came back to a game that I hadn't played for a few months the other day, and I needed to do something in order to progress. And I tried all sorts, but I just could not remember the mechanic that I'd learned last time, even though it was probably the last thing I actually did in the game. So I tried a few things, and I tried different variations, but eventually I ended up watching a YouTube video on someone doing it, and then I had to remember the controls and how to do that move again, because I didn't want to have to go back and start again with a tutorial. So how do we help someone in the situation where they've had to take a break from the learning? Well, something as simple as making sure they can go back to where they were when they last saved and they last partook in the training. If they've left an Evolve course here, we have our bookmarking feature, which allows you to return to exactly the place where you were last present in the course. And also we have things in our platform that allow you to indicate what you've completed and where you're currently progressing in. And that allows you to see where exactly you need to be And also we recap things regularly. So it's important if you say something like in module 5, you say, we're going to do that thing again that you learned in module 2. Well, how much time might have passed between then and now? They haven't had time to practice, or there's been other things on their mind. How do they recall that? Do they have a link back to the module, or do you offer a small link to pop up with a reminder video perhaps of that step? That's something we do in Evolve to help if we can. And if you've ever watched a YouTube video, and let's face it, who hasn't these days, it seems that you always get the option to like and comment at the end of a page or a video. And in our course, we provide the opportunity to give feedback at any sort of content. It can be rated, it can be feedback on whether it's good or bad, suggestions, error reporting, we accept them all. And this allows the disruptors, the philanthropists and the achievers of the world to feel like they are making a difference and even possibly guiding development. And of course, we make sure to use platform social features to allow our socializers to discuss what they've learned. They can share their own thoughts and perspectives and even tips to help others. They can reflect on their own journeys for themselves as well, because looking backwards at what you've been doing recently can often help you to cement that learning. At other points during the course, we encourage sharing of progress and thoughts and ideas around particular topics, and encourage peer review as well. But it is possible sometimes that you'll open up a social channel and no one will use it. We've got enough socializing to be doing out in the internet there. But why not create something like a chatbot instead? You could train it on your topic, and then the character can be your socializer. They can help to answer questions or to take concepts from that person. You can even have a character that the learner has to critique their performance on a task, for example. If you've ever seen the show Taskmaster, a challenge TV based quiz show, then you can see how many different ways people can approach the same challenge. So giving them one way and asking them how they would do it differently might well be a good concept you can use. There was a popular TV series when I was a child called Nightmare. And now this is the 1990s, and it was way ahead of its time. It used green screen technology and computer graphics and almost a sort of virtual reality concept. And definitely something to take a look at if you've not heard of it before. And here in this image, the player has entered a room in the dungeon, and he comes across a monster who is looking blue and sad. And to progress to the next level, the task was just to cheer him up. That was it. There was no right answer. There was no particular way that they should know how to do this. They literally just had to say nice things to him, and he turned pink and smiley. So could we recreate this kind of concept somewhere? Maybe with an AI chatbot again, or just talking people out of difficult emotions, or helping them address an issue in your learning. If you don't want to use a chatbot, or you can't, then you could always just have a series of questions that you can ask a character to either give them or get help from them. Another popular thing in video games, even from the early days, is choosing what to say next to a character to progress in some sort of interaction or task. And this leads to very different outcomes based on the choices you make and how you treat people. So it's a very powerful thing to include in learning. It can also be very valuable to use concepts that people are familiar with in everyday life, such as WhatsApp, or using social media posts for dealing with bullying or cybersecurity. You can even send them emails if your platform allows them. They can respond to you, or you could present them in a simulation if it's more easy for you. But for example, in our image here, you can see that the task that was given to them is presented as an email from a client. So it's asking them to make certain changes to a learning course. And this is just how it would be in real life. It's much more natural and comparable to the real world than just taking a checklist of things to do on screen and giving them that. There are many tools out there these days that can help you design interactions and content and fulfill the brief of making your courses more engaging and relatable. So Kahoot, for example, is often one used for quizzes, and Twine for branching stories. You can use color palette generators. So if you see something that you're inspired by, you can use those to create a color palette that's both relevant to the brand and also accessible. There's an article on eLearning Designer Academy, which has a really good guide on how to generate a color scheme for your courses. And again, we'll share that later. There are quite a lot of plugins for your browser if you're able to use them. You can have accessibility checkers, you can have font pickers and color samplers, and these kind of things can be brilliant to check if your work is accessible, and also to use them to find fonts and colors to use to be inspired by and use. For example, design websites such as Behance and Dribble and Fonts in Use. If you check those out, they can have some really inspirational imagery, and you can even hire the designers of those images if you need to. And don't forget that the world around you contains infinite inspiration. So magazines, shop windows, displays and art galleries in nature. While you're out, be curious and be creative. So why am I advocating using film and games and popular culture for inspiration in this talk? Well, they're definitely a big part of everyone's lives, as we've said. There are 3.32 billion gamers, and the book Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal told me that the average young person spends 10,000 hours gaming by the age of 21. Now, I'm sure that's actually much higher than when I read the book. But now we also have 28 million Netflix subscribers as of late 2024. We've got 500,000 plus feature-length films that have been created in the world, 150,000 different board games with 3,000 new ones being released every year, and 50,000 escape rooms and counting. As a society, we just can't get enough of media and entertainment in this day and age. And if we were to just embrace some of their methods and their successes with tapping into people's wavelengths and emotions, something that most people understand, it's a powerful thing, and already helps to build bridges to the real world. So this is where I often look for inspiration, because not only does it have all those things going for it, but it makes my job fun too. So films and TVs, you can check out ones that you love, or just current top 10 lists, or any of those that cover topics close to what you need. So for example, if you're writing about safeguarding or diversity or cybercrime, teams of writers and researchers have been used on these shows to hopefully create storylines that are emotionally engaging and hopefully accurate as well. It's important to check the accuracy. But if there's a similar topic, how did they approach it? How did they resolve the story? Was it satisfying? The example here is from Meta Compliance, and they used a dramatic storyline where you're part of a police drama, which is a very popular theme these days. If you don't have the time or the inclination towards this, then why not just take some inspiration from popular movies that you like and introduce some of the concepts from them. If you've heard of the hero's journey, it's a very common trope used in modern films. It was laid out by Carl Jung, and it basically applies to films like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. There's a character of some sort in the world, and they have an ordinary world that they live in, but they're called to an adventure. And there's a reluctance at first, but then they're encouraged by some sort of mentor. And eventually they decide, yes, I'll take up the challenge. And they may face tests and all sorts of challenges on the way, but they finally receive some sort of a reward when they come back, and they're reborn in some way with behavioral change and some sort of new knowledge or skill that helps them and the world around them. And back in the ordinary world, this is what we want. You know, we want people who may be at first a little bit reticent to take your training course. It might just be, oh, another compliance course. But we as the mentors want to bring them into our world. We want to help them to join in and tell them that we will help them to overcome these challenges, and we will give them rewards, and we will give them things they can take back to their worlds that are going to benefit from them. There's got to be some sort of consequence. How is it going to be better now than it is? And what do they get from it? Is it a special tool or a skill or a greater understanding of something? None of these e-learning courses we create are going to put food on someone's table, but there are other things that we strive for as humans, such as recognition or career development or relationship development, that we all want to strive for. If Frodo in Lord of the Rings had just said, no, you're all right, I'll stay here and tend to my potatoes, thanks, that film would have been a hell of a lot shorter. So we need to give them encouragement and support and a reward at the end. It doesn't have to be life-changing. It just has to give them a desire to persist with the new status quo. In the realm of books, you may have read some for professional development that have changed the way you learned and thought, but also for me, cookbooks and crochet guides with their patterns in them, and back to the maths textbooks that you may have had at school. They all allow you to explore and to learn and try out different things. We'll have a wonderful series of books that you may have come across called Choose Your Own Adventure, and they were an adventure that allowed you to basically try different pathways out. And you could always go back one step if the path you were taking didn't seem quite right. And in Evolve, you'll see on the right there, we have a branching scenario, which allows you to do the same thing. It will allow you to take a quest or take a path through a scenario. And it helps you by learning to make decisions and showing you the outcome of their choices, but also allowing you to do that in a safe space and to restart if necessary. Now, I am a bit of an escape room addict with 180 rooms under my belt, so I'm a bit biased on this one, but escape rooms and other puzzle games like this are being increasingly used to teach people teamwork and critical thinking, logic and problem solving. So whether you've done one or not, or you like them or not, it's the same thing. You give the teams a role and a purpose and then a goal, and you have to unravel the mystery and demonstrate mastery of challenges to achieve an objective. That sounds familiar, right? So again, you don't need to be an escape room designer or a puzzle lover to use their principles. You can just add clues in the course, or you can have them go hunt for answers on a website, or set your course up as a mystery that needs to be solved, just like the film one, and ask them to provide their answers to what they've discovered in a quiz at the end. So piecing together information is a natural type of learning, and seeing how the parts all fit together is a big reward. Now, the next slide does have a moving image, again, if you're sensitive. Now, it's vital when we're designing that you're thoughtful right from the offset, because there's absolutely no point in creating the world's best e-learning course if you put off 70% of your learners by making it unusable and frustrating for them. I don't know how many cardinal sins I have committed on this slide, I dread to think. But the message from this slide is that you have to be thoughtful about your color contrast, your font choices, making sure that you're using the correct sort of concepts for links and things like that, keeping the information short and to the point, and also be aware that people with any kind of visual problems may not be able to read the information. So of course, alt text and the things we know about in terms of accessibility are always important. Now, let me get rid of this abomination. And the language on the last slide, by the way, is Tahitian, if you're interested. But what I'm trying to get across is that we all know about accessibility, and we've heard the terms WCAG and alt text and contrast checking, and we believe it's something to do with maybe screen readers. But it's taking a lot of time for the message to become reality in digital content. And it goes way deeper than just disabilities. It's about equity for all who consume your content. The brilliant Susie Miller, who spoke for us last month, if you saw that, check out her talk and also her website. She's just released the latest version of her book, Designing Accessible Learning Content, and it's a really good read. I once heard the phrase, accessibility is not something you need to add, it's something you fail to add. And it can be as simple as just making sure that any fancy interactive components have an accessible version, minimizing any moving content, or at least being able to control it, and just making sure that you have tested everything in terms of accessibility. And if you thought my last slide was appalling and frustrating, check out User in Your Face. If you haven't already experienced it, it is quite something. So I'm going to leave you with some final words of advice to help make an effective experience for your learners. Now, you may have seen one of these shows, the Great British Bake Off or the baking show, where you have 3 rounds that contestants take part in. And the second round is always a blind challenge where contestants are given the same ingredients and no previous indication of what they'll be asked to make, and very few instructions. And they all do the same, they all have to produce the same item. Now, do you think they all thrive and produce high quality outcomes? No, not at all. There's a varying degree of success, and you'll hear them exclaiming and groaning and arguing that they've never even heard of a certain item or know what it is or how to make it. But they always seem to produce something at the end, even if they have a thoroughly unhappy experience at the same time, knowing for they're heading for the dreaded last place. But the third round is a challenge in which they're asked in advance to make a very specific item, to get a whole week to practice, and then they'll be doing it for real. So they've had time to fine-tune and ask for feedback. So are we sometimes guilty of throwing our learners into a topic which they know nothing about, expecting to resolve the information and to produce top results with very little guidance? There's our bake-off example challenge there. Bake something. And this is an example of the kind of variation you'll get from their work. So we might want the results seen here, but if we don't give our learners the right guidance and expect them to jump into training without knowledge about certain basic concepts, then we can end up with varying degrees of success and some complete failures. With regards to training that doesn't provide the full journey for everyone equally and satisfactorily, well, we need to let it go. We could make things worse, as you can see from the bake-off technical challenges. And one thing that often assumes that we often have is assumption of knowledge, because the words subject matter expert have expert baked into the title. And us as instructional designers, learning experience designers, whoever we are interpreting the content for the learner needs to remember that their audience will be coming into this topic with a lot less knowledge of some basic concepts than others will. And we need to make sure that we put aside any assumptions of knowledge and of the material or the processes or the concepts. And we have opportunities for our audience to be guided with extra hints and tips and links and asides if they need to. And how can we do that? Well, pre-courses, pre-tests, plenty of links to further reading that can be taken as required, uses of tooltips or glossaries for complex terminology, and even those sort of chatbots and extra help for providing information at the point of need. So Randall Munroe, a former NASA scientist who draws the extremely popular XKCD comic seen here. If you've not heard of him or seen his work, I implore you to check it out. He's an extremely intelligent and thoughtful guy. And in one of his books, he talks about the trend of at what point in your life did you learn the certain thing that everyone seems to know? If you've seen the popular trend of today years old, for example, where people share things they've just learned about in life, such as something a product does, or a certain sign means something, or there's a shortcut to do something, you often think, oh, well, I already knew that. But then if you think about it, you can't remember when or how you learned it. You just know it, and you think everyone does. So if you learned that Control Z on your keyboard usually undoes your last action, I bet you can't remember when you learned that. And if you didn't already know that, then you're welcome. And Randall says, even if you already know the right way to do something, it can be helpful to try and look at the world through the eyes of someone who doesn't. After all, anything that everyone knows by the time they reach a certain age, every day over 10,000 people in the United States alone are learning it for the first time. And that's why I don't like making fun of people for admitting something that they don't know. Because if you do, all that does is teach them not to tell you when they're learning something, and you miss out on all the fun. So I'm going to leave you with this. At the Learning Network conference late last year, Cara North, another industry peer that I look up to, she posed us this question. Last time you went somewhere you weren't familiar with, what did you use to help you? Your phone's GPS Maps app? Or did you get out your trusty compass? Although it's fun to just have a rough idea of where you're going, to enjoy the journey, progress means that we can now guide people right down to exact step-by-step instructions through AI-augmented virtual reality, simulations, a whole heap of new forthcoming technologies, I'm sure, that allow us to immerse ourselves and our learners in a way that we never have. So I urge you to get out there, take your compass and go and find some inspiration from the world, experience and play, whenever you get the chance, and think about how you can incorporate some of the immersive, relevant things you see every day in order to make your content more relatable and more enjoyable and ultimately more accessible for everyone. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. That's game over for my talk. I hope this year is quite the adventure for you. Thank you for listening, and I will hand back to Audrey now.
Awesome, Helen. Thank you so much. I certainly enjoyed the journey, and I hope everyone viewing this summit has as well. We already do have one question in the chat, so this is the perfect time to transition to our Q&A portion of today's presentation. So Gina, thanks so much for dropping your question in the chat. For those of you who are still tuned in, if you have additional questions that are top of mind, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A box below. So the question from Gina is, what software are you using to build your interactives?
Oh, well, as Intellum, we have our Evolve authoring tool, which has some wonderful interactive components that I've covered on briefly in the talk today. So it has simulations and infographic, branching components, interactive video, and we even have an iframe component. So if you've built something, a technology outside of the platform itself, such as Kahoot or Rive or anything that can be embedded into a HTML frame, you can use that as well, and you can bring in content from wherever. So there are so many tools out there that you can use to create interactive quizzes and all kinds of things these days. So Evolve, obviously we use the majority of the time because we think our tool has plenty of interactive components, and yes, we've got we've got the option to bring in any content from any other portal that is embeddable. So the possibilities really are endless, but our platform itself, in terms of the interactive gamification facilities that it has with the points and the challenges and things, and Evolve as a tool, that's where I go to first. But I could spend hours listing all of the tools that are out there, and hopefully you've seen some in previous talks, and I know that our next talk by Emily and Anderson is going to cover where Evolve is going in the future. So who knows really what other things we're going to have to add those kind of interactive.
Yeah, I love that. And the follow-up question to that is, can you give examples of interactive videos you use for training?
Oh, I should have got one out really, shouldn't I, in terms of thingy, but I've got, it's not exactly an interactive video, but actually I might have, let me share this screen. Hopefully that's going to switch over to this one. So this is what you saw earlier. This is our branching component. Now, it doesn't use video. I've just got some AI imagery that I've dropped in, but you can use video in this. And basically what it is it's one of these sort of choose your own adventure style journeys, where you start off in a situation, and you're asked how you want to progress. So again, this is a very sort of fantasy world kind of example, but you could use this for any kind of situation, any kind of scenario-based training. So it will give you some background, it will ask you a question, and then you can choose which path you're going to take. So there's just two options here, and it will tell you then, it will progress, and you can find out exactly how you want to take the journey on. And each time it gives you, again, some more information. So we could use video here instead of still imagery in order to provide a interactive simulation of any kind of situation. This one here does use video. And again, these videos are embeddable, or you can create your own from wherever you need them to be. And again, this is if you've done a driving test which has a hazard perception, again, you can use the video format, and you can answer a question to proceed to the next phase. So what is the main hazard scene here? It could be the parked car, and then we move on, if you're correct, to the next inspiration. But of course, out there in the world, there are tools that allow you to produce sort of virtual reality, 3D videos where you can explore a situation or a building. For those who work remotely, an onboarding video to show you around the office, if you've never been there, is a great tool as well. So that's just one example. Again, I could go on forever, but I hope that helps.
Thanks so much for being able to quickly jump into that example, Helen. A
That's okay.
follow-up question to this idea of building activities within a course, excuse me, is have you tried getting recommendations, ideas, inspirations from AI when it comes to structuring your activities for a particular situation? If you have, what are the challenges and what are the best practices?
Goodness me. Wow. Recommendations. And I must admit, my use of things like OpenAI and ChatGPT are pretty limited. I come from a long history in my career of being creative and coming up with content and ideas from my own brain. So I'm very reticent to sort of start having AI writing my content for me. However, in terms of structuring activities, I have no doubt that eventually it will be smart enough to do that. But I think at the moment, all I really want to use it for is to help me save time. Sort of building activities by maybe giving me, for example, we in our Learn Evolve course, we have a fake company and a fake course to come up with, and we give them a template course that they can use. And for that template course, I used ChatGPT to just write me some basic introductory content that a typical e-learning course would have. And then the learner themselves can take that template and they can basically go ahead and change it. And we give them the instructions on how to modify the text, how to modify the images, how to rearrange things to their own needs. I would never really use AI to tell me how to structure things because that comes from me. Now, I imagine that's one of the challenges. Is it's kind of like, do we trust AI to give us a format that works? But in terms of best practices, well, again, don't just blindly believe AI or blindly take what it says and think it's going to work. You need to do some testing. You need to do some. You need to make sure that you are getting feedback on the course before you launch it, because if your course reads like a robot, then it's not going to engage anyone at all. So again, it's kind of like use AI to save you time and to do some of the donkey work. But I would say I prefer definitely to be the creator still. I think that's important in today's world. I hope that helps. That's not too negative.
Yeah, we all have our different approaches to how we're interacting with new tools, but also generating new content. So,
Yeah.
follow-up question there is what tends to be, so you've given us a depth of information in terms of different ways to be inspired and the ways that you can translate what you're seeing in a real life scenario to online learning courses. What tends to be your biggest source of inspiration when you think about creating content?
Oh, without doubt, the learner. I love to talk to people who are going to take my courses, and I have to say that no matter what color you make your course or what content you put into it, I think about the learners first, and that's why learner personas and learner styles and knowing your audience, or at least knowing the kinds of people and the kinds of motivations that the people who will likely be taking your course, and that's going to be different for absolutely everybody, what they are. Because I'm a person, I'm teaching people. No matter what color I make the course, no matter what videos I put in there, I want the person to be motivated, and I want them to learn the right things, and I want them to learn it in a way that fits in with their lifestyle, and I want it to sort of be, a good experience for them. I hate that e-learning has got this reputation, especially during the pandemic, of, oh, now I've got to take another e-learning course. So I try to think about me being given this course. What am I going to enjoy? Am I going to enjoy watching a video? What's the best thing to teach them this concept? Is it showing them it? Is it letting them practice it? Is it just taking them through step by step? What is going to help them? So it might sound a little twee, but I think my biggest inspiration is the people that I'm helping, really. And I hope hope that's a useful answer.
Absolutely. And in follow-up to that, Jeremy just asked a wonderful question of how do you gauge how much information to give a learner at the start and how much to let them discover as the course unravels?
Oh, exciting. So we were talking earlier about sort of difficulty levels. And I think one of the things that we like to do, especially with our certifications, is we like to say, we're going to give you a lot of information here because this is a big, this is a big course. There's a lot to learn. Why don't you we're going to hide some information away maybe. And why don't you answer these questions, or why don't you tell us yourself? You have to have a little trust in the learners. You have to say, why don't you tell us how much do you know already, or how confident do you feel in this already? If you've been using this system for a while, or if you've been doing this job for a while, show us how much you know by a pretest or something like that. And then using certain tools like logic, we can hide away bits of information that they might not need. Now, that can be dangerous because they could miss out on something important. But another thing we've done, especially in the certification, is we've blocked up the information into repeatable themes as we go through. So there'll be tips, and there'll be how-to videos, and there'll be sort of the very basic steps. So they have to learn the basics, and they may want to watch the video. But one thing we always tell them is to read the tips, because the tips are something that we sort of, they're little micro bites of learning that we say, if you know this, then you're going to do really well. So we kind of offer different levels almost of interaction and engagement that they can go through, and they can say, okay, well, I probably know all of that already, so I'll skip on. And we never make them go through all of the content at all. We give them the I can't think of the word, but we give them the power basically to decide what they want to learn, and then we test them at the end, and we prove that they didn't just skip through the content, because they can do that if they want. They can skip through all the content, but we test them in order to have their certification. And if they prove that they know it, great. We didn't waste their time. We gave them what they needed to learn, and we gave them the onus to be the learner. So that's not going to work for everyone, I know, but that's one of the things we've done.
Yeah, excellent. And this will be our last question, Helen. It's very similar in terms of how the learner's receiving information. So how can designers create learning experiences that help learners avoid information overload?
Oh, wow. So again, yeah, basically going off what we've just said about sort of chunking it up and giving them the opportunity to miss out sections and just prove that they know that information. You can. One thing we want to do is we want to take all of the videos that we've got in our certification, which is a big course full of content, and then pop it into a separate video library. Now, if you think of YouTube, if you were to take an e-learning course on how to make a lasagna, it might take you quite a long time. But if you were to stand with the video next to you on your tablet and you were to make the lasagna along the way, it would be a lot quicker. So what we like to do is to take out the content and provide it maybe in a separate library, because not only does that allow them to then do it at the point of need, but also it means that you don't have to go back through a big course, and you can refresh your memory by just nipping and having a look at that library, or popping in and looking at the list of tips at the end of the course, or just taking the certification question assessment again, rather than having to go through the whole course again. And it's the same with things that have to repeat yearly, like compliance. It's kind of like, if you're given the same course, exactly the same course with just a different date stamp on the next year, you're not going to learn anything. You're going to go, yeah, a bit like that slide we saw earlier with all the text. You're just going to keep hitting that next button. So refresh the information regularly, provide small updates rather than another whole course, and take out useful content and provide it as a separate media library. Those are some tips, and hopefully they'll help.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Helen, for your time, your experience, your ideas, and the different strategies you've shared with us today. We are going to jump to our next session, which If you're tuned in now and you want to hear more about Evolve, join us for our next session starting in just one moment. We'll be hearing about the evolution of Evolve and the future of Evolve. So, Helen, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you very soon.
You're welcome. I'll see you in the next talk.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.